Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Two Wizards and a Mic. This is a podcast where we talk about cool stuff about D&D and how old we are and how the old game was really better and how the new game is okay. It's just not as cool as the old one. I am Shane, and with me is
Andrew.
excellent. And well, first off, we should have an update of the Kickstarter because there's big news about it.
Yes, so good news. It was very successful. It's funded, and we even got 2 stretch goals, which means the monsters go from 120 creature, 100 to 120, and we're going to add extra
Nice.
maps. And yeah, very exciting. Over 600 people from all over the world, including 5 people who'd never done a Kickstarter before, if my math is correct.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's interesting seeing the
610
breakdown.
maps.
Like,
Nice.
even though there's over 600 people, I think the most from one city was 8. So, yeah, and like the top city, I think, was Toronto with 8 people backing it. And then London was up there, San Diego, LA, which makes sense because we're on the West Coast here. And then Vancouver was in that top group as well, because that's where we're from. Calgary and Edmonton were both there. And then Minneapolis and Philadelphia and Houston.
Houston doesn't surprise me because I know that there's a large, or at least I've read there's a large contingent of D&D players in Texas for some reason. There's just something about maybe it's the desert heat or something.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't know.
huge. We sent more books to Texas in the last Kickstarter than anywhere else by far.
Really?
And again, we had a
That's
lot
awesome.
of Texans. And Sydney was also in the top 10 or so cities, Sydney, Australia, not Sydney, BC.
I was just gonna say, really, Sydney? That's kind of weird.
Yeah.
But Sydney, Australia. I mean, the fact that the books are going that far afield is really kind of, it sort of shows you that book publishing is not just in your local bookstore. Like you could I mean, I'm sure that, somewhere, in a bookstore down south, you're going to be able to walk through at some point in the future and be like, hey, I wrote that. I did that. That's cool. I sign it quietly. But, which I've done actually to some books that I've seen at bookstores. I've signed
Oh,
them just
yeah.
because I just felt like it.
Yeah. We do have books in a store in England, in a city on the East Coast, and we have books in Florida at a store in Tampa Bay.
Nice.
So yeah, that's kind of cool.
There's nothing like going into a bookstore and seeing a book you published on the shelves and going, I just did that. I made something. I can totally say that I did that. And now I feel complete. And we can go off and die because we're so old. But on
I'll just
that
leave that over
morbid
there.
note, um, we're talking about bards today, which
Yes.
is I don't know if I've ever played a bard. Have I? I don't even remember. I'm trying to figure out all of the stuff that I have indeed done and
Mhm.
played, but I still every so often will run into those ones where I don't quite know if I have played a bard. I think I have. I know that I've never used bardic inspiration though, so that's pretty bad. But yeah,
Yeah. So we have the Master of Song, Speech, and Magic, as the player's handbook says. So it's sort of the archetypal troubadour, the wandering musician, jack of all trades, the most versatile class for sure, because you can heal, you can fight, you can do magic. They're very resourceful usually. The bard was not in the beginning of D&D and basic D&D and the beginning of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. It wasn't there as a regular class. It came in as an as a class. There was a special name for these kind of classes, which escapes me right at this moment. But it was a class where you had to fulfill other um, requirements in other classes, and then later on you could become a bard if you had,
oh,
maybe I
okay,
think it was something like if you were a 5th level fighter and a 3rd level rogue, and you had a good dexterity, good charisma, then you could become a bard. It was like a bonus class. So it wasn't a regular class for a long time. In fact, by the time it was a regular class, I wasn't playing anymore. And not many people played Bards when it first came out, that's for sure. So famous Bards, well, the very obvious one these days is Jaskier, also known as Dandelion from The Witcher, because a lot of people
Yeah.
know that video game and TV show and that character. There's also a character in Gary Gax's original campaign called Kyotum.
Oh.
So he had a home campaign with his kids and his friends, and there were some famous D&D characters in that campaign, like Mordenkainen, Tensor, and Kyotum was one of the NPCs that was in that original campaign. And that's why there's a magic item called Kyotum's Ointment, the healing ointment. It's from this character who was a sort of hero god, sort of a demigod kind of character. There's also Alan O'Dale from Robin Hood. I think Star-Lord from Guardians of the Galaxy, I think he's pretty much a bard. His performance is more dance than music, but he has many of those qualities. Like he's a jack of all trades. He has a lot of abilities. There's also this character Harper Master in the Pern novels, these fantasy novels. And there's Jack Black pretty much in every single role he's ever done. I would say as a bard, especially School of Rock, obviously, which is an incredibly subversive movie. I love that movie because they market it as a family Disney movie.
Right.
And if you watch the director's cut, the entire director's cut or the comments with the director and Jack Black are them saying, "I can't believe they let us do this." Again and again. It is such a subversive movie. I love it. It's great. It's very surprising. It's not what you would think. If you just see the cover or you just read about what the movie is about, it's way more than that. And then I think there's a bard right here, actually.
That's right. Actually, I should play a bard next and actually do a lot of singing. One of the characters that just popped into my mind while you were talking about Star-Lord is in Conan the Barbarian, the film, the Arnold Schwarzenegger film. I would consider one of he's got 2 or 3 at some point. He's got a few different people following him. And I know that one of them is definitely a bard because he's talking about like the weaving the story of how Conan became and and all these kinds of things. And I think it's the same character that does like the narration at the beginning of the film. So I would say that whatever his name is, like, unfortunately can't remember.
There's another one for sure.
But the actor who played him just turned 90 a few weeks ago, so that kind of made me happy. But
wow,
yeah, I so many examples of bards that you wouldn't even think of them as bards. But you're right.
I think there's more than we know. The archetypes sort of hide sometimes in different guises. So I think there's a sort of controversy or sort of an attitude towards bard. Let's save that till the end after we talk about what they can do. So their hit dice are pretty good, 1d8. They're pretty close to a fighter, a ranger. The armor, they can use light armor that can kind of get you by. Weapons, all simple weapons, plus a few others, like basically a bunch of swords, which fits. Skills, you can choose any 3. So it's the most versatile. You can just choose 3 that you want. And most classes only have 2. Tools, you can, I didn't realize this, you can have up to 3 musical instruments that you can be proficient in. I always assumed it was just 1, but it's actually 3. Spell casting, there's a lot of useful spells. Some examples include Light, Mage Hand, Vicious Mockery is those are cantrips, all really useful. Charm Person, Comprehend Languages, and then all the healing spells, Disguise Self, Fairy Fire. Featherfall. There's so many. There's so many useful spells. Now, I don't actually think that they need to have spells, because as we go through their features here, I think you could just do it with their features. So the main one that everybody knows about, if you play D&D, is Bardic Inspiration. So
Yeah.
that's when the bard can influence other people in the party, um, to give them a bonus for their ability check, or attack or save. And that's using words or music to inspire the other people. There's Jack of all trades. There's a bunch of different features that basically improve your proficiency skills and add to them. Song of Rest is a really powerful one. So the whole party can benefit from healing from the bard and a rest.
Which we've
And
used in
then we
gameplay
have,
before. Yeah.
yeah.
That's cool.
And then there's Counter Charm. So that's a good one. You can actually disrupt effects to protect the party from things like being frightened or charmed. And you can also add spells at a higher level from any other class to your spell list. So I think there's so
That
many things
is
there that you could
cool.
use music or the bard's oratory skills and say that they have these effects as opposed to giving them spells.
Well, the
Why
counter
give them
charm
spells?
one right away. I mean, that to me is when you're running up against some sort of large creature like that has the ability to make the party experience fear
Right.
or to run away or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Like being able to, I actually had no idea. I did not know that was part of a bard. That's actually very, very powerful.
Yeah, I don't really think they need spells, personally. I think you could do a lot of those effects that they can through interesting features with their musical performance or their inspiring words or poetry, or you could work all that in so that it's not necessary. Again, I think there's too much of trying to make all the classes do everything. Every class can heal, every class can fight, every class has spells. I think it'd be more interesting if the classes were, independent, special classes as opposed to being all the same.
And that's the challenge with making characters, and actually not even just making the characters, but actually making them work together in a party, because that is so difficult. And when you have characters, as you're saying, like having very much the same sort of skill set across the board with some minor differences, that's kind of boring. Like walking up to a wall you can't scale is a challenge. It's like, okay, guys, we got to get over this wall. This wall
Mhm.
here, and then you have like the rogue or somebody go, oh hey, actually I have this skill or I have this spell that can allow me to spider crawl up and over. um, it sort of it forces people to actually get creative in how do they solve a particular problem. And when everybody has the ability to crawl over a wall, or when everybody has the ability to, I don't know, break through the wall or whatever it might be, it's just, it becomes a snore fest. Because the idea that you get up to a wall, and if your character does not have the skill set, has no ability to get over whatever the obstacle is, then you got to figure something else out. I got to be on the other side of this wall. All right. Oh, hey, there's a trebuchet. I have the ability to turn into stone or something and not break. So I'll hurl
Mhm.
myself over the wall, or I have the ability to fly, or I have the ability to, it's you just have to figure something else out, and hiring henchmen to, I don't know, pick you up and maybe like those zombies in World War Z, to help you kind of crawl over. Like, there's all
Right,
kinds of
right.
ways you could solve the problem. It just don't turn around and be like, oh yeah, I got that spell. Yeah, I could totally do it. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the class, and we'll detail a little bit more about it, but I love, it's super versatile, which is great. I just don't think the spells are necessary. Like, they're fine, but if you want something more unique, I think it'd be cool to have a bard that doesn't have magic. Maybe we have to do that in the new book. We have to make a new subclass, because we had a subclass in the last book with the ranger with no spells, which I think
Nice.
actually works fine. Um, so now in the player's handbook, there's two regular colleges, two subclasses. the lore subclass, which are basically bards that collect knowledge throughout their travels. We should say that too, like that's part of the archetype, is this traveling, wandering character, which is perfect for adventuring.
Oh, totally
Um,
is. Totally would.
yeah, so they have three features basically: cutting words, where they can use their words or some sort of performance to distract and confuse um, the enemy, and they can actually take the bardic inspiration die and use it and they can take it off the enemy's roll. So that's quite a useful one. They
Nice.
can also learn spells from other classes, which all bards can do later on, and they can use their bardic inspiration later for their ability checks added on as well. So again, becoming very useful as far as using different skills. The other colleges of valor, where bards basically keep the memory alive of famous heroes through traveling the land and telling stories about them, and they're also more of a warrior bard. The other one is a bit of a sage in a way. This one gets to use their bardic inspiration to inspire damage by the companions as well. So the companions can actually
Right.
get better damage with it. They get an extra attack at one point, so they become more like a fighter almost. And later they have the ability, when they cast a spell, to use a bonus action to use a weapon attack. So that's pretty useful.
Nice.
Um, yeah, and I've never played a bard, but I would be very interested, again, because of this versatility. Now, I'd say pros, again, the versatility for sure. The performance aspect, there's so much flavor you could have in terms of role play and your character development.
Yeah.
You could really have a lot of humor involved. I'd say the cons, there a lot of people pretty much play the same character. Like everybody's sort of Jaskier from The Witcher. And that was true even before that TV show. People played that sort of kind of smart Alec bard who's sort of annoying. And in fifth edition or in the later editions, that's sort of the general feeling. There's quite a few people who find them annoying, or they're not big fans. I think part of that is just that there haven't been there hasn't been a lot of range in how you can have that, the kind of characters you can have, right? Like we have
Right.
many examples of different kinds of wizards or different kinds of warriors, but like the cleric, there are few really good examples of a unique bard.
Well, I was just thinking that you could almost say that if people were wanting inspiration to actually come up with different ways of playing a bard, it
Mhm.
just dawned on me that isn't Deadpool kind of a bard? Isn't he kind of a character who, I mean, he's got that self-aware thing,
Mhm.
um, but definitely that part of that character is smart alecky, kind of, I mean, wildish, a little hard to predict, um, but loves to tell stories, like
Right.
in like a way to say distract the villain. The villain
Right.
is winning, or the villain is has the upper hand, and the character goes, does something like, well, hey, by the way, I'm sorry your mom didn't like you, or something, and the villain's like,
Mhm.
what are you talking about? But again, Star Lord did that at the end of that first film, distracting the villain, uh, when the villain was clearly at that point about to win, sort of thing.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. I actually don't know anything about Deadpool at all.
Think of Star Lord, but with a lot more vulgarity,
Right.
and a
That's
bit
probably why I don't
more
know anything about it.
unpredictable.
But I
Yeah,
would guess that pretty much most of the characters that Chris Pratt and Ryan Reynolds have played, a lot of those
are pretty much
characters
the
again
same.
have that quality, right? You
Yeah.
know, um, yeah. Yeah, it sounds like that would be another good example. I do like the Star Lord example a lot because I think it sort of updates it for people. And for me, like Guardians of the Galaxy is such a good D&D movie, I think. Like it is such a good party. It's an interesting party, a diverse party, in terms of their skills and who they are, and it's funny, and there's great action, and yeah, I mean, I would I would hope that my games are a bit like that. I like that quality.
I was just looking up some other additional sort of inspirational sort of examples of bards, and I
Mhm.
had no idea that the I hadn't even thought of it, but it totally makes sense. If you've ever seen, what was it called? The Mad Max Fury Road, the
No.
big Mad Max film from 2 or 3 years back,
Yeah, no.
right before the pandemic, and on the top of a large vehicle, like this big huge truck, there's like these 20-foot speakers. And there's this guy, dressed up like you'd expect a Mad Max character to be like, and he's got this
Yeah.
huge guitar that shoots fire out of the neck, and he's like, this kind of thing. Yeah, that's a bard, I gotta say,
Yeah.
because he definitely he made the troops kind of really get into, uh, I don't know, whatever battle they were about to have, but there's just so many things you could do with this character. I had no idea. Like
Yeah.
it's such a versatile sort of. It's not a fighter. It's not a magician. It's not a. It's not a lot of things. It's its own deal, and that does grant it a lot of power. And I think that it's probably neglected way too much.
Yeah, like the first thing I think about too is imagine if you had a bard with a really, really good dexterity and you chose to be stealthy. You chose one of your skills as stealth, and maybe sleight of hand as well. Now you've got this, now you're a fighter, you're a healer, you're a rogue, you've got a bit of magic. Um, and again, yeah, I don't think the magic is necessary. It's fine. It doesn't spoil the class. I think it's a great class. It's one that, every party, if you have a bard, um, they can be very useful. And they have been in our campaigns. Um, we've had a few bards, and they've always been really, yeah, really useful because they have that healing ability. They still can fight. They're not squishy like a wizard or a sorcerer. And yeah, and then they have these extra abilities, right? The bardic inspiration, I think, is almost used in every single combat encounter I can imagine that I can remember with a bard in the party. That is what it's there for. And some of the others, like the cutting words, really useful.
I want to play a bard. Dear DM, I would like to play a bard next. Is this possible? I do believe that it would be a useful character because, um, you say in the notes for the show is that there's also this ability or this not ability the fallback for people to make them all very same um, that there's potential for all of the players to really fall into that trap of what they think a bard is. They think of him
Mhm.
actually. You said it earlier, like the Alan O'Dale, who's always been this sort of Robin Hood sort of archetype of what these characters are like,
Yeah.
and I think anyway our generation anyway has been very much exposed to the sort of early Disney sort of these characters are seen over and over and over again, all these Disney movies, and that one just being the most explicit, the most obvious that what his role is, and that's I think that somehow that gets locked into that archetype really gets hammered into your brain, and that's sort of it comes out in the gameplay, and there's so much more to them. See, even I am like thinking, how have I neglected this class? Like, how have I not done something with this class before? Like, I I'm pretty sure I've played one, but I have no real sort of memory of it. I can sort of get the feeling I must have at some point, but uh, yeah, it's so sad that this The poor bards. The bard colleges need to have more enrollment. We need to really get the word out. We need you to enroll in a bard college. We need more bards.
It's a great class, I think. And I did, it's the second one, it's the second player's handbook after the barbarian. I remember reading that player's handbook, the fifth edition one. And as I got to that, I remember the first time reading it, this was a great class right away. Yeah.
You know, I gotta
So it's
say
on your list.
it's on the list, and I'm sure my list is growing. I mean, we've been talking about these particular classes for a while, like over the different ones in the game, and there's always something I'm learning anyway that I'm like, oh, it can do that. Oh, I didn't know that. That actually makes me want to play it now because I just did not have no idea. Whose fault is that? This guy's. But really, when you have all of these elements of a character, like we've talked about some of the other classes where you and I kind of agree that the subclasses are kind of making them same to all other classes and things like that, which is interesting. That you would think that they would. I'm picking on Wizards of the Coast, would be a little more inventive as to what these subclasses can do. Of course, in their defense, it takes a while for them to do stuff because they have to have it play tested and things like that. But here's the problem: is it the fault of the publisher or the fault of the play testers going, "Oh yeah, no, that totally works. We should keep that in because it makes it like a fighter, or it makes it like a wizard, or it makes it like a whatever." It makes it like a beholder. We should totally be a beholder. I think that's going to be the next class. Monster classes. It's going to come.
It's already
going to show up.
It's already done in their new monster book. They have their fantastical races, they call it now, where you can be a dozen other things. I think people don't really, they think always that choice is a good thing. It seems like a good thing, but there's studies that show if you give kids a huge amount of toys, their creativity actually goes down.
Choice, I could totally see
is
that.
Not necessarily like having lots of and quantity. It's not necessarily a good thing. But I like there are lots of new subclasses that have been put in a few other of the new books, and there's some really good ones. But you have too many, it's hard for people to keep track of them. Then sometimes what's happened now is some of the new subclasses are more powerful than the original ones. So you're getting power creep as well.
I hadn't thought of that. That's that's unfortunate.
So I think they should have trusted the original book a bit more. And there's issues like the ranger is not perfect. Maybe they gave spells to too many classes. But there's mostly good stuff in the basic mechanics and the basic rules. And I think it seems to happen a lot in gaming. There, at a certain point, there's overthinking comes in. It's not just gaming, but in our society. But as it's for me, it's more obvious when it's in gaming. And now, who knows what direction they're going? Because I think, as I said, I think the basic mechanics are really good, and some of those original core subclasses are good. And they could tweak things a bit, but I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm just going to stay with those basic mechanics for the most part, and keep using those because they work really well.
I agree. I mean, there are some of those different mechanics that have been added in as subclasses that I for some reason Magic the Gathering pops into my mind about how they have particular, like a white deck, a black deck, a red deck, a green deck, and they assigned particular styles of play. Just it sort of evolved that way, at least how I sort of think of that game. And they have these, but they're very, very specific in these very specific genres. and you can have the whole idea is you're mixing and matching these different cards that do different things, but you're
Mhm.
learning how they can sort of overlap and make uh, powerful attacks or powerful defense or whatever it is, however your playstyle is. But thinking about these classes that we've been talking about, you're giving them too many spells, giving them just too many, all these different elements. Um, you're it just takes away the it makes lazy players when they're learning,
Mhm.
because they don't necessarily know that, well, my character has this restriction. I can't step on grass or whatever it might be. So I like the wall idea earlier. You've got to come up with these different ways of overcoming obstacles and being able to defeat the villain or support the villain or whatever the adventure is. But it's one of those things that I think after a while you just kind of run into players that have, I don't know, had it too easy. God, I'm sounding like I'm attacking millennials or something. Like, oh, that's had too easy. When I was in school, I had to walk uphill both ways in the storm. But I don't
I
know.
was
I'm
going
not sure
to
if
use a
that's.
D4 for hit points, not a D6.
You guys are lucky. We never had D10s. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting that the Bard is sort of that one of these, not an original, but has come along later and has
Mhm.
really sort of illustrated some of the issues that you can run into both in gameplay and just the ability to create a character and actually play that character without, I don't know, cheating or being lazy, that kind of thing. I don't know. That's just kind of how I feel about it. But
Yeah, I think some of those archetypes, it's just hard to, yeah, maybe it's harder to be a little bit more original in general, or people just feel more comfortable going back to the traditional bard character. But again, overall, I think it's really good class and really solid the mechanics. And one of the best classes is coming up next week as well, which is rogues, who
which is
I
another
think
hard one to
are
play.
um yeah, I think there's more range. Personally, I think there's more range with rogues and more examples.
Yeah.
And I would also say if you play it carefully, that the rogue is one of the most powerful characters. I played one. Yeah, that's one of my only high level characters I've had for fifth edition. And yeah, they have the ability to get into the action, get out of the action, do a lot of damage, the ability to escape. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
another
that
great
that
class.
that skill, the I want to call it backstab, but not the backstab, the sneak attack,
Mhm.
is that has changed the way an encounter has ended on several occasions.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
we will talk about rogues next week. But before we go, any final things? What can people do now that the Kickstarter is funded? What should people be doing? Should they still be getting in there and getting a copy or what?
Yes. Well, that's a good question because in about 2 weeks or so, there'll be something called a backer kit, which
Right,
comes out after, so people who still have a chance.
right.
And you will also have the ability to get a lot of different merchandise from us, the other books in the series, in the Monster series. You'll be able to get other Game Master handbooks that we've published. You'll have the ability to get all of these different stickers and other merchandise we made around the books. So that's going to happen fairly soon. And if people miss the Kickstarter, they have their second opportunity. So yeah, and then of course we have links below for our other products and ways to get a hold of us.
Very cool. And don't forget to pick up every single book that Cawood Publishing has ever published, because when you look at a book cover and you see this griffin right there, that says quality. I will keep a straight face. I really will. I promise. But anyway, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening on the audio version of this podcast, and don't forget to check out the Kickstarter. not too long left, and there's another one coming down the road. Shh, I'm sure that we will find out more about that later. But again, thank you, Andrew, and we will see everyone next week.
See you
Bye.
later.